Riot said that they took a bit of a 1-week break in between the last patch and this one, and I mean, you could see it just in the number of changes that they made on the patch. But I think we can all agree that even if they didn't take a week off, there would still certainly be champions who are in need of some dire help, and today I'm going to be giving you 7 champions that you need to avoid on this patch. Plain and simple, these champions need a change made to them or just a little bit of help thrown their way before they're really worth playing right now. Regardless of whether or not you're listening to my advice here or not, you should definitely go check out our website in order to get guides that get to go super in depth on just about any topic relating to League. There's only 2 more things that stand between you and figuring out who is trash on this patch, and that's the like and sub buttons, which you should definitely hit in order to keep up with the videos that we release on the channel, and also if you happen to agree with the champions I've placed here. And if you happen to not, then let me know in the comments who you think I should have included. The very first champ we're going to mention here is Lillia, as she is pretty new, and after seeing her kind of slide slowly upwards, but not really to the point where she needs to be, she is definitely lacking something. Now, I can't say exactly what. I'm not a complete genius here. I don't know if she needs more damage. I'm not sure if she needs more movement speed. You know, that's something that the 200 plus years is supposed to be able to figure out. But she definitely needs something because you can't justify having a champion in several different roles always having a negative performance. The only place that's even remotely close is top lane, as top lane Lillia running Conqueror seems to be doing just barely okay, and I mean barely. I really heavily recommend you stay away from this champion, no matter what role you're trying to play her in. It's just not worth it compared to everything else. While the flexibility of a given champion like Lillia is a good sign of how strong they could be or maybe are, it really just isn't the case with her, as she's just kind of mediocre at best in any scenario you throw her into. And when you're looking at your best case scenario being just kind of meh, then why bother? She's certainly not going to be somebody that you want to pick if you're looking to win consistently. And while we're on the train of champions who are flexible and able to be played in multiple roles, which is a very powerful thing in and of itself, let's talk about Syndra, because she's pretty similar to Lillia in the sense that she technically could be played mid, bot, and maybe even jungle, although that's pretty uncommon, but not impossible. Syndra has been hit with nerf after nerf for a couple patches, not all in a row, but over time. And over time, it's really easy to see that she just is nowhere near where she once was. Even though, yeah, a snowballing Syndra or a Syndra in the late game when they finally get some penetration is able to one-shot people, you just can't really get there at a time where it matters most of the time. You've got 80 carries building Death Dance, you have everybody having at least some kind of magic resistance, so a lot of the itemization and a lot of the patterns that Syndra used to benefit from just aren't there anymore. You're looking at situations where she regularly runs out of mana in lane, or simply lacks damage in some cases, and maybe even both, where if she blows everything, it's still not enough. Because those key targets that are also buying Death Dance also happen to have a Yuumi, a Karma, a Sona, a Lulu, or something nearby that can just allow them to live through it anyways. She's good when ahead, sure, but in every other scenario, it's just like the Lillia problem. Meh in all regards. Not something that you should be looking to pick actively right now until she gets a little bit of help. We'll revisit the champions that are pretty flexible party a little bit later, but let's move on to somebody who's a bit more specialized. Gnar in the top lane. He used to be a nightmare to deal with. He was almost always picked in pro games for a long time, and he eventually just got nerfs that completely cycled him out. He was basically never picked in pro, and also isn't really picked in solo queue, and that's for a reason. He's just not that good. As a ranged top laner who can also transform into a bulky melee fighter, it's a really weird dynamic that you have to nail, and right now he's just hitting on the underwhelming side so that he isn't overpowered. Up until now, he's just kind of been scratching around the average categories, but right now he's suffering from that short range / soft engage problem that I've talked about a couple times already on this patch, and it really isn't helping him at all. For you Gnar players that are out there, I'm sure you guys feel exactly what I mean. It can be almost impossible, or maybe even impossible into certain team comps, for Gnar to get into a fight where you can actually do something. And even if you do, it might end up just being underwhelming because there's too many tools to deal with what you can throw around. Because I'll tell you right now, the chances of you actually throwing around a champion with your R are pretty slim. And if that's the case, there's a lot of other top laners that are going to be way better than Gnar. While the next champion might ring some bells in the top lane, I'm actually going to be talking about him in the jungle, and that's Sett. Because right now, Sett is in a really awful position. As you might already know, he's gotten nerfed repeatedly in his E and his W, in terms of the damage that it does, in terms of the cooldown, everything that you could just about think of relating to a single ability he's gotten a nerf on other than his Q. Riot has explicitly stated that this is because they don't want him to just be really strong in support and in jungle by maxing his W or maxing his E and building full tank. They feel like that's not a good thing for him to have. Support Sett was kind of whatever already. You didn't really do much damage with him in the first place, so nerfing it a little bit more wasn't that big of a deal. Jungle Sett, however, did get hurt by this a decent bit. I really recommend against picking him in the top lane and support because the only thing that's left for him to do is be a very consistent engage tool for his team. And that's why even though the nerfs do affect jungle and make him worse, it doesn't actually interfere with what Sett wants to do. Because jungle utilizes phase rush and focuses heavily on movement speed, it doesn't matter if you aren't doing 20 more damage than you were before, because that's not what you were looking to accomplish anyways in the first place. Same thing for top lane, where if you're building for attack speed and auto attack damage, then you're not really caring about your E being nerfed a little bit or your W, because that's not what you're relying on, right? But then we circle back to the issue that we talked about with Gnar. Short range, soft engage problem. And while Sett certainly doesn't have soft engage in most regards, if he doesn't have phase rush, it can be almost impossible for him to get in range without his flash. And that can make it basically impossible for Sett to have any presence in a game where he normally would have before. And that's completely because of the meta changing all on its own, nothing related to the nerfs to Sett's kit. It sucks that that is what it is, but it's what the champion is experiencing, and that's why he's not doing so hot across all the roles. And while jungle and top aren't feeling it as badly, you can definitely still see it and feel it. You might be able to bully people around early on, but you're gonna hit that point where it just feels awful to even exist, because you feel like you can't do anything anyways. And another champion who suffers from similar problems to Sett is Kalista. I mean, just think about what I just talked about and apply it to Kalista. She has the ability to bully people in the early game, whether you're playing her in AD carry or in a solo lane. For sure, that's absolutely undeniable. Her damage and ability to chase after and kite people is amazing. But then think about how far you need to be ahead for it to actually matter. Because with most champions having access to CC in forms of slows, stuns, maybe even knockups, it's very difficult for Kalista to exist when it's actually already risky for her to be hitting people in the first place. I mean, I can come up with an example immediately off the top of my head. You know what Kalista absolutely hates? A Veigar cage. That's just one ability that makes her life miserable, because she can't go where she wants to unless she has that 5-minute cooldown flash up. And at that point, I mean, what are you going to do? Spend 1,300 gold to get a QSS to do less damage than you would if you had bought more damage to maybe kill them before the stun matters? No, it just sucks all around. No matter what angle you're trying to play it at, it's not possible for Kalista to really get what she needs to get done. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just go look at your match history or think about the matches that you've played recently. How many games would a Kalista have been okay with running around in? How much hard CC did the enemy have? How many slows did they have which would affect her attack speed? All these things make it hard for her to exist. Just like the current meta makes it basically impossible for a Pyke to exist unless he's snowballing out of his mind, which, as you can tell, is already a pattern with these champions. And that's a natural weakness to the meta that's going on right now. Pyke is great at stopping people who have shielding or people who are immobile because he has the ability to hook them out, stun them afterwards pretty freely, and he's also very good at escaping those types of people because usually their CC isn't instantaneous. But when you've got champions who can consistently threaten Pyke's existence, whether they be big tanks that hold him in place for the big damage dealers to destroy him, or mid-range mages and AD carries who can deal with him anyways, to the beefy bruisers who don't really care if they get touched by Pyke anyways because they're just going to slap his head off, it's really hard for him to be able to play through things like Death's Dance, Zhonya's, Archangels, natural shielding and healing abilities that are all present right now a lot of the time. At least that's problems that support Pyke is feeling. Mid-Pyke doesn't feel it as hard because he gets to build a lot more damage, gets a lot more gold, and therefore can stay ahead of the curve and still be competitive even into the things that he hates the most. So if you are going to pick Pyke, you better be picking a mid lane. Support is just not the best place for him right now. The only exception that I could possibly think of would be if you're playing in a lane with a fasting Senna, who's not going to be taking CS anyways, and therefore you can just get the gold. But really, that's a lot of hoops to jump through. Why even bother in the first place? You're working so hard just to make it barely work in the first place, so you could just pick something else and avoid all that problem. It's likely not worth it to have that kind of bot lane anyway, as you have Senna Pyke doubling down on AD, and physical damage top laners are pretty common right now. So asking your mid laner and your jungler to somehow fill the holes that sort of team comp would have is a big ask, especially if you aren't coordinating with them. The last champion I'm going to go over here with you today is Karma, because frankly, there's no redeeming qualities to her right now. The only thing she has going for her is the fact that her damage in the early game is pretty good. But since her cooldown on her Q has been nerfed, it's not even as good as it used to be. Not even close, because many other champions are able to zone her out in the 2 seconds extra cooldown that she's facing in the early game. For the most part, mana isn't really an issue on Karma, and so her low cooldown Q felt great to use, because you didn't have to worry about it. Unless you are just pressing the button every single millisecond that it comes off of cooldown, you usually don't have issues. When you dial it back from 7 to 9, it turns into a big issue for the first 3 levels, and even then, it still persists, as it doesn't reach its former strength until you're level 9. At that point, the entirety of the laning phase has flown by, and this equally affects top lane Karma, mid lane Karma, and support Karma, as they all rely on her Q. It's the ability that you always max, no matter where you're taking her, and when that's taken a hit across the board, it absolutely is going to drop her into the gutter. And that's exactly where she is, and exactly why I'm warning you not to pick her. With that, we've covered all the champions that are the worst offenders on patch 10.17. Don't forget to head over to our website to find more guides that get to go way more in depth than what we can put out here on YouTube, and of course, everything is made by challenger level players, so you know you're getting the best of the best info. No matter what skill level you are, or what you're looking for, we've got something up there for you, so seriously, check it out if you're looking to improve at League. And as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.